Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO Podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining the show, man. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. Today's guest is John Smalley. John's an entrepreneur who's running a pretty impressive portfolio, founder of a holding company that owns and operates 11 different businesses. And I think that number is growing. He's the CEO of one of them. It's a company called Simterra that's taken a pretty interesting approach to bird abatement. So I want to learn more about that with John. What's neat about John is blending the big picture thinking with really operational discipline. He genuinely knows how to scale companies. He's worked with some massive companies, which we're going to learn about with his background, and has soul to it. So whether that means building local jobs, using AI in creative ways, using data to fuel the growth of their businesses, and then holding teams accountable as they scale and grow. So in this episode, we're gonna bounce around a lot. John has a lot of great insights he's going to share. How you evaluate businesses, the pillars for which you determine whether it's a great business, your approach to leadership, and the systems that you use throughout your companies. So John, thanks so much for sharing your time with us, and we're super excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to talk to you and happy to talk through whatever you want. I've been surrounded by a bunch of amazing people throughout my life, and I've learned a lot. And I think when that happens, you first of all, you recognize that you got there with the help of other people, and anything that I can do to help or share, ideas or strategy with somebody else who's trying to hustle and go make something happen, I'm happy to help.
Love it. So I gave a brief overview, but for those who aren't familiar, maybe just give a quick overview of what you're doing now, holding company, the companies you own, operate. Tell the folks more about it.
Yeah, I'm a byproduct of corporate America. Let me say that. So I know this is a podcast really focused on entrepreneurs and business owners. But I cut my teeth in corporate America, and I love what corporate America offered me. I was able to go with two relatively large corporations and start at the beginning and work my way through the company and gain tons of experience. And throughout that process, I got more and more confident with my ability to be valuable outside of those corporations. And I started testing the waters, so roughly call it 7-8 years ago, I opened my first company. I now do have somewhere in the area of 11 companies. Those companies go anywhere from local companies to regional companies to national companies to international companies. We focus in the areas of consulting, of recruiting, of wellness, of software, product and hardware, manufacturing, pest control, environmental science, and investment. And to be fair, you mentioned the 4 pillars, which I've talked to you about before. We'll go into anything. Some people love sports, some people love food, some people love music. Andrew, I'm a business nerd, man. I like business. Like I like to study it. I like to watch it. I like to be part of it. I like to challenge myself. I like to challenge other people. I like to bring people together. And so for me, that's a big part of why we're in so many different areas. I'm business agnostic with regards to the ideas. That being said, we do really focus in 2 key areas, and that's ideation. So somebody who has an amazing idea, they've got a business plan, they've done the research, but they just have no idea how to take it from an idea in a white paper to an actual, post-revenue cash producing valuable company. And then the second area that we excel in is what I'll consider to be like early startups or young startups, and what I'll call mature companies that are in that $1 to $3 million range. So I got this idea. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably there. I've executed it. I'm grinding my butt off every single day, right? I never see my wife. I never see my kids, but I'm making more money. But I'm living what we call entrepreneurial poverty, right? Which is you're poor when you start the business. business starts producing money, you start having access to money, but you're so buried into the business that you can't get it past $3 million in revenue. And you might as well still be poor because you're at that office for 16 hours a day. You don't see your kids, right? You don't get to take vacations, all that stuff. So when I find that, not only do I know that we have the ability to scale it and grow it based off the resources, as long as it checks the parameters and the pillars that we're looking for, but I get crazy excited because, at one point that was me, and somebody showed me, hey, look, if you just change your mindset, if you do things slightly different, you can actually be the person who owns the company. And there's a big difference between the person who owns the company and the CEO. The person who owns the company is able to go to Portugal for a month, right? They're able to not be tied to their phone every single day. And there's a process you have to go through to get there, but you've got to be, you got to be okay with the concept of looking at things differently, doing different jobs, hiring better people, letting people, be empowered in your business and take the reins. So, man, I just went all over the place on that first question.
No, I love that. There's so many questions I want to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, when you guys evaluate a business, or let's say you find a new one that is interesting, are you buying the whole thing? Are you investing part and the person stays on? Like, how are you working with companies?
I never wanted to limit myself, and I never will limit myself by saying this is my only option. Right now, I have preferred options, but no, I don't. And keep in mind, I'm not buying a business to run it. So, Andrew, if I came in and said, hey, I want to buy your consulting company, I'm not buying it to take your job. I'm buying it to grow it and scale it. Right. So I'm buying a business, and I'm trying to take on part of it, and I'm trying to bring in the resources necessary to get that business and the business owner to the next level. So I'm a big fan of self-managed companies. From my perspective, I think the most value that I add and the happiest that I am and the most productive that I can be is in that chairman, position where I can bring in the resources. You created a product and the product's amazing, right? And you've gotten to that $3 million mark, but you're an engineer, and I walk in and I can tell you with after a couple minutes of talking to you that your SOPs are probably lined up perfectly. Right? Your operations are lined up perfectly, but I can also probably tell you that naturally you probably have a pretty crappy or shitty marketing department, right? Or your sales strategy doesn't align to everything else that you're trying to do, right? Your onboarding process is terrible, And so what we do is we say, Andrew, look, you're crushing it in 3 out of the 5 pillars, but without these other 2 pillars and you have no experience and you don't know anybody in those arenas, you're dead, or you're just going to stay where you're at, which eventually leads to death. And we can come in and make those changes. We definitely have criteria that we look for within those businesses or those industries. But overall, that's the approach. And so no, I'll tell you this to answer your question simply. You can edit everything else out of this. No, I very rarely, out of all the companies, I own 2 of them by myself. One is the consulting company. And one of them is the holdco. Everything else I have partners in. I just prefer to go through this process with other talented individuals that I really, really like. It makes the process fun and worthwhile. Yeah,
for sure. So it sounds like you've got a playbook. You know what works within it. You can identify a company, say, hey, you're stuck here. Maybe your sales and marketing are awesome, but maybe you're a terrible operator. You don't know much about operations or the execution or infrastructure. We're going to come in, we're going to use our playbook to execute this, this, and this, and off we go. Or vice versa, right? Where they're great from an engineering perspective, but man, they don't know anything about sales and marketing. So you take that playbook and you implement that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
We live off some key principles too. I mean, I think it was Steve Jobs who said, like, you don't hire somebody smart and tell them what to do. Like, you hire smart people so they tell you what to do.
Yeah.
If you get obsessed with titles, if you get obsessed with power, if you get obsessed with control, you're limited, right? So in those scenarios, I want to keep the founder vision alive. I want to keep the founder energy alive. And there's times where, quite frankly, the founder needs to be buried in the business. And what we'll end up doing is using the recruitment company to come in over the top. I own a recruitment company. I think I left that out. But they, to come in over the top and say, look, let's find the company a leader, because you got a great idea here and you got 6 or 7 employees that love you. But when we add all these, 10 or 15 other employees, not only are you not a good manager, you're not going to want to manage. And that team is going to need a leader. They're going to need somebody who can drive through vision. I got to be able to speak to the entire organization in a way that everybody thinks I'm talking to them directly, right? But you got to manage people individually. And so we just really tried to say, look, you're dominating in the areas that God gave you the ability to dominate in. But in order for you to get to that next level, you've got to up your game, and you got to bring in other people, and you've got to allow other people to do the job. And when you explain that to the right person, typically what you hear is like, well, that's my baby, right? You've probably heard that term a lot. Like, this is my baby. People refer to their business like a baby. I mean, there's few things in my life I've ever loved more than my babies, right? And so if your business is getting that same level of love at the end of the day, no different than my children, I'll do whatever's necessary for them to have the best outcome possible.
Let's talk about, one of the questions I have when learning more about you, a lot of entrepreneurs, self included, you go into business, you have an idea of making money for yourself and being your own boss, right? But you think about or talked about, local impact, creating jobs, neighborhood impact. How does that influence day-to-day operations and how you approach all these different businesses that you invest in and operate?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a few things there. Let me think about that. So the first thing you talked about is I want to own my own business. I want to be my own boss, and that was the initial feeling for the first 2 or 3 businesses. And then you become obsessed with, I want to allow other people to have that opportunity, right? Hence why I don't try to own everything. I want other people to start down that path of being an entrepreneur. There's a difference between being a CEO and an entrepreneur. There really is. And both are very, very impressive roles if you're good at them. I think that recently the threshold to becoming a quote unquote entrepreneur, especially with social media, it's ridiculous. I talked to a guy the other day. He says, I'm an entrepreneur. So what do you do? He said, I drive for Uber. And I'm in the backseat of his car. And I said, you're not an entrepreneur, bro. I'm going to tell you, I'm happy you convinced yourself that, but driving your own car doesn't make you an entrepreneur. You're an employee for Uber, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But being an entrepreneur means that you took the opportunity to not go work for somebody else, to go broke, to work 60 hours and get paid like you work 10, right? So I want to talk about one of the things that leads me to be successful in that area is finding somebody else who wants that and then helping them. Because when you empower somebody else to have that opportunity that they likely have never had before, man, the amount of commitment, loyalty, trust, and work ethic that you get, which are all mandatory for success in that space, are through the roof. So that's the first. What was the second part of that question that you asked me? Sorry.
Well, I mean, I think it weaves together. We're talking about some of the impact, right? The creation of jobs, or just having the impact locally.
Yeah. Well, locally, I mean, when you look at cities that are struggling, you look at towns that are struggling, communities that are struggling, like why do they struggle? Right. I mean, they don't have jobs, right? People are poor. They don't have access to money. They don't have access to education. And, I'm a pretty devout Christian, but outside of God, I believe that the number one thing that drives impact is business, and good business. Right. And so when you open a business, there's never a more profitable thing to do, although it doesn't feel like it, especially early on, than the right thing. And the right thing can be determined many different ways, but it has to kind of fit the criteria, right? So when you open a business and you ask every single person out there to say, hey, would you switch from your pest control company to mine? Would you switch from your doctor to my doctor? Would you switch from your bank to my bank, right? You're asking for them to do something, to give up something in order for you and your family or you and your business to have a better life. I think people have to understand that circle is a circle, and it's an ongoing circle, right? And so when you have a successful business, you're employing people in the community. That guy or that girl has a job. They go home and they take care of their sons, their daughters, their moms, their dads, their rent, right? You have an obligation to pay them well. They have an obligation to show up and earn you more than you're paying them. That's how a business works, right? So, so you have an obligation to the people in the community and treating them right. But then you also have an obligation to participate. I got to tell you, one of the things that I love most about the company that I'm in today is that they support the local Little League, right? And I say they, it's me. I mean, I'm the one who signs off on that, and I love it because Little League is an amazing opportunity for little boys and little girls to understand the value of teamwork, to understand the value of hard work, right? Yep. To understand the outcomes associated with those things. It's just an amazing opportunity. And there's points in times where that league or sometimes that family can't afford it, right? Yep. Not everybody has the money, especially you got 6 kids and you're trying to put them through Little League. I mean, shit, Andrew, every kid now has a $400 bat, right? Like
Dude, totally.
it's ridiculous. But let's just say you don't have the $400 bat, right? I mean, and you don't even have the money to put your kid in Little League. As a business that asks those same people to buy your services, you do have an obligation to give back. And here's the beautiful thing. It feels awkward the first time you've done it because you don't know if you can afford that $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 sponsorship, right, that you're putting out there. And what seasoned veterans who have done that before start to realize is that's not a sponsorship, man. That's a marketing opportunity because you're putting that money out there and other people pay attention to who supports them. People want to support the people that support them.
That's right.
So ultimately, how do you make an impact? Well, you make an impact by taking care of people in the community. You ask them to take care of you and you treat them well, they treat you well. And you have a stewardship mentality around, again, supporting the people that support you.
You mentioned, I totally agree with what you just said, but you mentioned sort of like the responsibility as the business owner with, taking care of the folks that you employ and, you're feeding their families. And I agree with that. I also think that on the flip side, not flip side, but I think it's incredibly rewarding to be an entrepreneur. And as the business succeeds, you're helping those people succeed and you're changing their lives, right? Like if you have a successful business and an exit and you have, you're sharing stock or equity with your employees, and then they can have dramatic, life changes. And I think I've been through that. It's super rewarding, right? Where
I would agree. And I've had conversations throughout my career where people thought it was unfair that I made the money that I make. Why do I make what I make and a teacher makes what they make, right? And it was almost like there was this association with having money and having to do something wrong to get it or being evil, and that bothered me because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't not contributing and taking. That's a double negative, right? And kind of what you said, and to go back to the upside, look, the more profitable we are, the more success we have, the more opportunities I have to give back, So if you make a lot of money as a business or an individual, you have options. Give more money to your church, give more money to your local school, right?
Yep.
Take care of a kid who doesn't have that. I mean, that's what happened to me, right? I had so many people. I don't come from affluency, and it wouldn't matter if I did. But I had so many people who stepped in and did things for me, and I just couldn't understand why as a kid. And now as an adult who's been blessed to have a little bit of fortune, like I feel obligated to give back. So yeah, it does feel good. It feels really good. And you feel obligated to, and nobody gets to where they're going by themselves. Right. And if you do, it's not worth it, quite frankly. And you probably won't stay there. So, it's a full circle, man. It comes from asking for support and giving support back. And that can be at the community level, that can be at the employee level. If you hire people and they show up every single day and they bust their ass and they think about their job before they go to bed and they lose sleep over their job and they, or even if they don't, even if they just show up and work at 9 to 5, but they show up and they do the job the right way, and take care of those people. They're taking care of you. And if you take care of the people that take care of you, it typically works out really well.
Well,
it's not easy,
you're going to have better retention. You're going to get better performance. If they see that you're taking care of them, they're going to go above and beyond, and if not, they're going to leave. That's what I've experienced.
Think of the most fruitful relationships you have in your life. Get out of the business world, right? How many one-sided friendships do you really value?
Yeah.
You don't, right? It's the buddy who calls you when you're down on your luck, not the guy who calls you when you're riding high, Yeah. I mean, so people just have to understand that there's a certain way that you live. And if you live a good life, one way or another, you're going to have pretty good outcomes, and if you do the right thing, you're probably going to have pretty good outcomes. And if you treat people the right way, they're probably going to treat you pretty well. And there's never been a more profitable time than right now to do the right thing, to be a good person. I just fully believe that. I think that it gives you the ability to make money and sleep well at night. And if you can't do both those things, one of the two is not worth it.
Are there certain things you do within your companies to incentivize people to take it? Do you have like certain systems or incentivization systems, or like what do you do for your employees that maybe other people don't do?
Well, keep in mind, I don't manage most of my employees.
Right?
So, for me, it's about creating opportunity. It's about creating opportunity, creating autonomy, bringing in the resources that this guy or girl may not have, but understanding clearly where the person who reports into me, where are they at and where do they want to go? And then having honest conversations with them about what it'll take to make that happen. And then having further conversations around, if we make that happen, this is the upside for you, Andrew. This is how it changes the life, for your kids. Your kids go to a better school. Your wife drives a nicer car. You drive a safer car. Sometimes you just drive a car as opposed to taking the bus, what level we're at, those are real conversations depending on the company that I'm working in. So the first thing is I want to understand what's important to you. If you're, there's so much this garbage out there now on social media where everybody, is driving. I'm an entrepreneur. I make $1 million. I got a bunch of bling. Like, no, you don't, and then on top of that, like not everybody wants that. So there's this concept of like A players only. Well, I'll tell you what, you try to have a company full of A players only, because you're going to have you're going to have a lot of this, I'm trying to think of the right term here. A lot of people arguing with each other, right? Everybody has a place. I have guys and girls that want to, oversee and run $100 million companies. And then I have other people who just want to make enough money and go home and sit next to their husband on the couch or their wife on their couch and be happy, Yep. And that was something that took me a long time to learn because I don't have that. I have a lot of energy, as you can probably tell, and a desire to do more. But I had to become okay with those people and understand that they're good people. So to answer your question, man, if I know what's important to you and we agree that by you working for me, we can accomplish that on a regular basis. And then we identify what the actual metrics are, what things have to be done, what the plan looks like. And I tell you that if you do what you said you're going to do, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. That creates a very, very fruitful relationship. And I think that's just the right way to treat an employee. And look, here's the other thing. When an employee leaves, if you treat them that way, like, okay, then they left, right? They're probably going to start their own business or, there is times where you just simply lose an employee. But at the end of the day, if you can go to bed and you can think to yourself, you know what, John, like you did everything you should have done there. You treated that person right. Then chalk it up. You developed a really good employee that's employable by somebody else. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it happens, right? But if I go to bed and I think, man, you know what, I didn't invest in Andrew. I didn't tell him the truth. I didn't follow through on the things I said I'd follow through on. Then don't be surprised when that guy or girl says, see you later, and goes to work for somebody else who will. And often in that situation, they'll do it for less money.
And it's the world is very small and things always come around, right? And so if you don't leave, whether somebody leaves or not, you got to leave it on a positive note, right? Just because things have a way of coming back around. So you got to treat people the right way.
No doubt about it.
Let's talk about you've been dealing with some pretty big businesses, that scaled tremendously. What kind of systems do you guys use to ensure smooth operations, accountability without losing control, right? I mean, a lot of stuff that we talk about on a regular basis is like, systems. And you talk about self-managing businesses. Like you got to have good systems for that. How do you guys operate? What do you guys do?
It's different per the company because again, I'm driving what the company doesn't currently have. And you have kids, I have kids. And I think the best managers in the world, not necessarily leaders in the world, are parents, right? I have two little boys and they're both studs, but they're different kids, right? And so the way that I'm going to get my oldest son to have the best output or the most success possible is slightly different than the way I'm going to get my youngest son to do things the way I want him to do it or to have good outcomes, right? Now, there's certain Smalley family rules that it doesn't matter which one of them I'm talking to, this applies, right? But then if I'm talking to Jacob, my oldest son, he's a little bit more sensitive, right? But he's caring and he's thoughtful. And so I'm going to appeal to those things and help him, drive things or create the outcomes he wants. And same thing with the youngest son. He's a little bit more emotional and he's temperamental, but man, he's aggressive and he's smart and he's pretty funny, and so we take advantage of those things. And I would say from how do we run our companies? It is somewhat based off the company. It's somewhat based off the leader but the key staples that you have to have is you have to have accountability. And so for me, we focus on 90-day goals. So you talk about, we call them rocks. It's part of the EOS system, but we have to be working towards something. And 90 days to me seems like something that's manageable. It's not too far out there. I don't know if you've ever had to create a 5-year business plan, but they're a little bit of bullshit because you took 3 hours to do it. Now with chat, it takes you 10 seconds, but you take 3 hours and you put it in your desk drawer and then you never look at it again.
Yeah.
90 days is real, especially if you're having weekly meetings, right? So we talk about 90-day goals, and then we have weekly KPIs. And those KPIs are, if I do these 5 or 6 things at this level, and I do it every single week based off the time that I took to think this through, the time I set aside where I didn't let anything else get in my way or bother me, my chances of being successful are pretty good, right? Yeah. And there's that, I don't know, there's a saying out there, I have no idea who said it, but somebody told me one time that a fool with a plan will outproduce a genius with an idea every single time. You know, how many times have you gone to happy hour or, you know, been rapping it out with your buddy, and next thing you have this amazing idea and then it just dies, right? And so, and it dies because it's an idea. I mean, there's more billion-dollar ideas in graveyards than you can imagine, right? But if you can actually put a plan to it, that's a big part of it. Have a plan, right? If you can put a plan to it, you don't have to get it right, Andrew. You don't. The plan doesn't have to be right. The plan just tells you when your plan was off, and then you pivot and you make pivoting okay, right? And you talk to people about the fact that one of the strengths that we can build up here is the ability to determine when you need to pivot, you know? And so ultimately, man, what do? I drive accountability. I try to drive vision through clarity. This is where we're going. I try to make sure that each person on the team understands what their role is in that vision, right? So you manage individually, and then you manage to the person, and you manage to the business. And some businesses excel in certain things and don't need a lot of help, and other businesses need a lot of help in things that they don't excel in.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something. It's having all those components, because when you have that vision, it is okay to pivot. You have to pivot, right? It's been, depending on the size of the business, but especially with the early stage businesses, right? You know, you're going to have to change and adapt based on the successes and failures that you see, right? Or what's happening in the market. I mean, even look today, right? With tariffs and everything happening with the economy, you have to be nimble. You have to be able to move on your feet.
Yeah,
but having those checkpoints, right? You're having the weekly meetings, you're setting the 90-day, I don't know if you're using OKRs or 90-day goals, like that's super important to have so you can keep the team focused and structured.
Well, and then there's culture, right? So those are all kind of process. There is a culture, and you have to hire for it, and you have to kick people out when they don't have it, because it's possible that somebody will hit those KPIs, that somebody will hit their quarterly goals, but they're not the right person. And, you know, that's a true litmus test of whether a leader is willing to do what's right for the business. You know, you have somebody who's succeeding to just kind of detracts from the culture because they got a crappy attitude or they're lazy, you know? And so for me, you know, we talk a lot about working hard, like that is something you choose to do. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you decide I'm going to work hard today, or you decide I'm not going to work hard today. So for me, working hard is a non-negotiable. Right. And we talk about non-negotiables, like, sorry, I don't care who you are, how you get things done. If you're not willing to put in the work, you know, there's no opportunity for you to be here, you know, and then be open-minded. Like when you get feedback, like before you just respond, and, you know, like, so trying again to develop people. And by the way, it's not like I or you were born with these things. These are learned behaviors, you know, that a lot of times you do have to teach people, but, you know, and then go out of your way to care about the people you work with and the business that you work for, you know? And so if you can build cultures around working hard and, you know, being ethical and honestly just getting stuff done, you know, you're going to be good as long as those metrics are in place. But I do think you have to have the culture, and I think you have to have the actual strategy that includes reasonable goals and reasonable timeframes and reporting. And then the final thing I would say is that you got to have a place where the reporting lives. Because you can have a lot of these conversations with your one-on-ones, and it can be tough or it can be great. But when a week goes by, you guys forget about 90% of what you just talked about, right? So is there some type of documentation that I can hold you accountable, or you can hold me accountable for what we talked about in that 60-minute meeting? If not, don't have the 60-minute meeting. You know, I mean, just free up the time and, you know, use it somewhere else and hope that you get a little bit of ROI out of it.
I would bet most people don't do that.
Nobody does it. It's not natural, you know,
right? To document what you talked about in a meeting. Most people, I would bet, don't do that. Everybody has these AI note takers nowadays, but nobody is like, hey, here's what we talked about.
And nobody looks at them. I don't even look at them, man.
Nobody looks at them, dude.
I have them. Look, again, it's do as I say, not as I do. But on a serious note, what I did realize is, man, I'm wasting 15 hours a week in meetings if I don't document this. But if I'm talking to you and I document what we said and I document what I said I'm going to do, right? And then I document what you said you're going to do, that creates a level of accountability. When we get together next week, we're looking at that document, right? Yeah. And then here's the other thing, and I didn't mention it, lead by example, right? So if I told you I was going to do 3 things, guess what? Do them immediately. Right. Do them and then follow up. Andrew, just so you know, we talked about A, B, C, and D. You're going to do your things, but I'm done with this. And I'll have an answer to this by Friday. Right. When people see you prioritize the things that you said you would do, they start to prioritize the things they said they're going to do. And that lead by example, it's a timeless truth. I mean, it never doesn't work.
That's a really good point. And I think of the flip side too, where if somebody knows that, man, we just talked about that, but he's never going to follow up. He's just going to forget about it. They're going to notice that. And they're just going to be like, oh, I don't have to follow up. I don't have to, continue on with that conversation. That's a really good point.
There's a really good saying. I think it's by like Jocko Willington or somebody, says it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate, And I'll tell you that that's an area that I'm not always the best in. And therefore, and maybe I'll leverage this into one other thing. I think the best leaders, I'm a big studier. I wasn't born the smartest person in the world. I do have a pretty crazy drive, but God gave me enough brains, right? To if you partner those 2 things up, like my brain power and my drive, that over time, I'm probably going to outperform most people. But I think when I study the best leaders in the world, the guys or the girls who've gotten the best results, they obsess in 2 areas. And it comes in this order. And the first one's self-awareness, right? And so what I just said to you, I know that I'm not good at that. I know that I will say things and naturally just assume that you're going to do what we agreed to, because that's what I would do, right? So I hold my standard to you, and you don't carry it out. And because I didn't put the tools in place, it just gets let go. So self-awareness. So being self-aware of how other people feel, how other people react, your ability to get the results that you want or not get the results that you want. And so self-awareness is the first one, partnered up closely with number 2, which is self-development. If you're capable of being hyper obsessed with being self-aware, look at Steve Jobs. When he used to walk into the room with the engineers at Apple, man, he was crazy aware of the energy in the room, how they were responding to the things that he was saying. This guy was 6 levels above these guys, and he cared. He cared about how they thought he spoke. Was he clear? Was he to the point? Was he pro-engineer? He cared about those things, and he was hyper obsessed, borderline paranoid with getting it right. So his self-awareness was through the roof. And when he didn't have it right, what did he do? He immediately went back and figured out, by the time I get to the next meeting, I have to figure out what I wasn't doing to get the result that I want. And I've got to give myself some sense of education or perspective that's going to allow me to change. So the best leaders in the world, man, are just hyper obsessed with self-development. Self-awareness and then self-development. And if you partner those 2 up, it's a never-ending cycle. You're just constantly getting better and getting better and getting better. And if you add that to the concept of God gave you a decent brain, right? And not everybody's created equal. I've had this conversation a couple of times recently where your grandma and your mom and your first grade teacher tell you can be whatever you want to be, Andrew. That is just not true. Like we are not all programmed the same way, right? We have different outcomes. And so if God gave you those abilities, you should use them, right? But if you have a good God-given brain, you got an amazing work ethic, and you're really obsessed with self-awareness and then self-development in a positive way, man, I think the chances of somebody else outperforming you are rare. And if they do, who cares? Like, let them be a billionaire with you. Yeah.
I guess probably with the self-awareness, I'd add humility to that, just like the humility to know that I'm not the best. You can't be the best at everything. So why not pull in somebody else who has that strength, right?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking that you know everything.
That's it. And I sucked at that I still do suck at it sometimes. I'm crazy competitive, and sometimes it comes out, it's not being, humble, but I actually think humility is something that I've been really self-aware about for the last 10, 15 years. If you want to lead people, you better figure out a way to incorporate that into your game. And it keeps you grounded. That's
Well,
the
it
other
sounds
thing.
like you were leading when you were young. I mean, I remember when I was first leading teams or leading companies when I was younger, like there's some insecurity there, right? Where you're leading people that sometimes are like twice your age and like
Yeah.
you kind of think you have to know everything, but you don't. That's not
No,
what being a leader is.
no, but it's being aware that you don't know everything, right?
That's
So
right.
tie in what you
Yeah.
just said, being humble enough to be aware, and then being driven enough to go get the information you don't have, and
Hmm.
it's not that complicated. If you just boil it down and commit to a couple principles and then hold yourself accountable, odds are things are going to go your way over a period of time.
Yeah. You mentioned Jocko, my son's 16. I'm trying to like hammer into my son his staple concept of extreme ownership. Because my son has a tendency to say like, oh, it's not my fault. I'm like, no, it is your fault. So like, it's not your fault, but you got to own it, dude. You just have to like own
Yeah.
fixing it
How you
or
dealing with that?
own.
Is it working?
No, God, no. But I'm still
No.
trying.
No.
I'm still
Yeah.
trying.
I just remember when I was 16,
Yeah.
I mean, there's things that when I was 26, there's things probably, I mean, I'm 43 now. So, there's probably things people told me a year ago, whatever, and then you realize, oh shit, that guy's got a lot of perspective. But unfortunately it's also sometimes you just got to let people, there's no, what they say, there's no substitute for experience. Like,
Yep. Oh, totally.
and if you put those things in their head, though, I do think that as a dad, you're doing a really good job there, because I do think that if you put those in their head, they're in their head, and at some point it'll click, and
That's what
maybe
somebody
not
told me a long time
your
ago.
kid
They
gets
told me
there.
you might not think they're hearing you, but still say it anyway.
Yeah,
It's getting in there. Even if they don't respond or acknowledge it, it's still getting in their ear. So you still
yeah,
have to say it.
amen.
That stuck with me,
Yeah, yeah, and it stuck with him. So
Yeah, yeah. So when we talked yesterday, we were talking a little bit about AI. I would love to get some more perspective from you about how you guys are using AI within your businesses, or what your thoughts are on how people should be adapting it. Like, can you tell me a little bit about, are you guys using it across or in any of your companies, or how are you guys thinking about
yeah, I think first of all, anybody who's competing against me should not use it. I think it's a terrible tool and it's way overrated. Obviously, I'm being facetious there.
It's just a fad.
Look, man, it's the future,
Yeah.
and you're either getting on board with it or you're not. And so we're trying purposely to find ways to use it in every organization with every purpose or with every person. So not just at the organizational level, but how is each person going to use it? And you need to look at AI. My go-to is chat, but you can figure out whatever you want. You need to look at AI and study AI because of the way that it's going to evolutionize the way things are done. I believe that the way we're doing this podcast right now, based off of AI, 3 years from now, this format will not exist. It won't. The way you run your business, it won't be run the same way. And you're either going to evolve and be at the front of that curve, and you're going to be the big winner, or you're going to be the guy or the girl that says, that doesn't happen in my industry. Why is it that every person believes it's not going to impact their industry? Right? Because what you're going to end up with is a lot of these younger companies coming in and eating your lunch.
Yeah.
You're going to be a successful business for 10 years with a great reputation. And all of a sudden, some high school kid who really dominates this tech stack is going to come in and create a one-man company that can do what your 25-man company does. And he's going to be incredibly profitable, and he's going to do it better than you do. And you're behind the times. So AI will produce winners and losers. And the winners will be the people who adopt it. When you look at its capabilities, it's amazing, but you have to look at AI. AI and Google are not the same thing. Google is a search engine, right? Google, you say, find these keywords, and Google goes and finds you the closest thing to it. AI is a thought partner. AI is the ability for you to pick up your phone and go to work or go on a walk or go to the gym or, whatever you're doing, and have the smartest best friend ever who's read every single book in the world, right? And by the way, can remember every single book in the world, who has read every recent publication, who monitors everything real time. I mean, the ability to compute through AI and then give you the best answer possible. And if you don't like it, keep talking to it. It's a thought partner. But when you probably had this experience, when you show somebody truly how to use AI, as in like, hey, talk to it like this, ask it this question, upload this, man, people's minds are just blown.
Yep. Yeah, I had the experience showing a couple of people just recently. Yeah, I think it's only as powerful as your ability to use it. Meaning, most people will just like ask it a question, like you're saying, like they would ask Google, or they'll give it like a one sentence prompt. If you really want to get the most out of it, man, you have to feed it so much context, or tell it exactly how you want it to respond, or who it should be. Like you're saying, you could say you're the world's most renowned business strategist, and you have this experience, and this is what you know, and then ask it what you want, and the results will be dramatically different.
I mean, but it's again about putting in the work, right? Are you willing to put in the work to understand how the people who are really winning with AI do it?
Yeah.
Because it's not like we all grew up with this. Not one of us got taught AI in school, you know? And so when you go in and you put in the work, you're going to get ahead. And I'll tell you what, right now, 70% of the population doesn't have a clue what it is or how to use it, right? And 25% of the population uses it the same way they use Google. And 5% has realized, like, holy cow, I'm going to make my company better, and I'm going to make every other person on my team exponentially better. And we talked earlier about the need to like treat people the right way. Like, well, look at this. Hey, you don't need to lose your job. I'm going to have you make 5 times as much money because you're using this and you're coming up with better ideas quicker, and you're avoiding cliffs, and you're, you know, and when you teach somebody that, it's no different than the best coach or the best teacher that you had in your life. They remember you and they're loyal to you for that. Right. And on top of that, it's just the right thing to do.
It's an amplifier. I totally agree with you. When you said thought partner, that's a perfect description of it. And how I found it to be incredibly productive is as a thought partner. Hey, we're going to work on this problem together, and you bounce ideas, and it can bring them back, and it makes you so much more efficient. That's a great way to
truthfully, whether you own the company or not, right? At some point, we all kind of judge ourselves before we go to bed at night about how productive we were. And when you have that really productive day, it feels good, man. And when you can understand that you can have really productive days every day by talking to ChatGPT, and by the way, it remembers everything. So you can keep on an ongoing conversation, and you can go back and forth between different topics and talk to it about your job, about your company, what you do, your industry, ask it to do research for you, act like the world's best consultant, right? Ask me questions. I have it ask me questions all the time. And sometimes when it asks me questions and I'm not sure what the answer is, I say, I don't know what the best answer is. What would you suggest? It's a thought partner. It's a real thought partner. And if you can utilize it that way, you know, I think we got I thought last year we had like 5 years, but now I've seen the rate of adoption that's happened over the last 6 months. You probably got another 2 years. But if you are using it right now going forward after listening to this or watching this, and everybody else starts using it 2 years, like everybody uses it 2 years from now, which I think will be the case. My kids only use ChatGPT, by the way. Like they don't use Google anymore. So let's just say it's 2 years or a year. That's a huge head start in this world. Like that's like running a race and you know, getting an hour long lead.
It is. I wonder what it'll be like when our kids are older. Generationally, you know, they're just going to use it so much more. I mean, the tools will be so much more powerful then, but it'll change how things are taught in school. You know,
it should, and it should. We can do more with less, right? Like, you know, it's one of two things. You're either amplifying things, you're making what you currently have amplified, or you're going to reduce. You're going to reduce the need to not use resources that aren't getting the job done at the level that AI will do. So you're either going to lose your job to AI, or you're going to use AI to get promoted. I mean, you pick, but you're probably not going to be sitting in the exact same spot you are 5 years from now. Not as is.
I do think from a CEO or entrepreneur's perspective, you can think about using it to drive higher revenue per employee, right? To say, I'm going to make my team more productive, and I can do more with less. To your point, I can have more ARR as a company with less resources.
Absolutely. There's a free version of it. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, instead of calling me, call this. And if you don't like what the answer is, then go from it, you know, but you know, so there's a $20 version of it that I'm not sure how much better it is, but they suckered me into that. So, I mean, I have that, you know, but look at it as a business, man. It's, you know, you're thinking downward, think upward, create your own board. Tell ChatGPT, I want to create a AI focused board. I want to have legal on there. I want to have HR on there. I want to have finance on there. And I want it to understand my business, and I want to be able to ask the board questions, right? You no longer in a lot of industries, if you did that 5 years ago, you had to give up 10% of your company to get those people.
Yeah.
You're not going to pay $19.99 a month.
That's super interesting. That's a great point.
You know?
That's a great point. All right, man. We've been going for a while here. I want to respect your time. Let's
Sure.
end with a takeaway. So, at MAP, action is part of our middle name, Management Action Program. We like to leave listeners with something tangible they might be able to take back to their business. If we could, do you have one nugget you can drop for the audience? A process, a principle, a habit, something that you think they might be able to take back to their business and implement tomorrow? What could you leave?
Well, I would say two things. From a mindset standpoint, you got to be obsessed with the details without being consumed by them, right? Because if you don't know your business, don't expect other people to know your business. It'll get away from you real quick. So figure out a way to become obsessed with the details without being consumed by them. And a lot of that is, do you have the right tracking, reporting? Have you taken time up front to put the thought into allowing your business to just operate on an operating rhythm? And then the second thing is what we just talked about. If you're not using AI right now, you're putting yourself and your whole business at risk. And if you don't think it exists in your industry, like there's a saying that says, if you're playing poker and you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. Like that's this scenario, you know? And if you are using it, then good for you. Go crush it. Go take market share, because you as a 5-person, 10-person, 15-person company can now go compete with 100-people companies. Yeah. And guess who's not using it the most? 100-people companies, right? So if I could give away my secret, that's it. Empower your people, empower your companies with this, because it is like nothing you've ever seen. This is not the .com evolution. It's not, basic technology, email, internet. It is a thought partner like you've never seen. And if you can give every single person in your organization the smartest thought partner that they've ever met, right, your future is going to be really, really good, and they're going to thank you for it.
It's transformational. It is. All right, John, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us. Before we wrap up, where can listeners go to find more about you or your portfolio or businesses?
LinkedIn. You can find me, John Smalley. And there's a lot of different businesses. The one we didn't talk about, but that I run, is called Simterra. You can go to gosimterra.com. It's a first to world technology that can stop a bird from landing without hurting the bird. And we don't have any time left, and it's not worth it, but it is worth it. But that actually is a game changer in the way that we treat animals. We can actually now stop issues associated with animals, but created by humans without hurting the animal. So I love it.
Okay. All right. Simterra, folks. All right. Well, John, thank you again. We really appreciate it. And everybody listening, thank you so much. And we will see you next time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.